right. So. I remember I'm projecting from another machine. So today's topic, learning about unofficial SF. So we're going to welcome our speakers and I'm going to let them take over. So joining us today, we have a great panel, and I'm going to let Orlando finish introducing them since he's much more prepared to introduce them than I am.
Oh, no, yeah, we have a very stellar group of panelists. We have Sasi, she's a Salesforce consultant, 6 times certified, 2 times Trailhead Ranger, Women in Tech user group leader. She transitioned from user group in Virginia to now that to a new location in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken. And she's also a Rad Women coach. We have Mary Tagler from the Chicago Salesforce Saturday group. She's also a certified financial planner. She's an MVP. And we have Eric Smith, also an MVP, technical architect at Gears CRM, and 6-time Salesforce certified. And welcome, and we're so glad to have you, and really looking forward for everything you're gonna tell us about.
Thanks, Orlando.
Well, I can start if you like. We were going to talk today about unofficial SF.com, and I just wanted to, for those who haven't seen it, show you the website. So I will share my screen. There we go. So unofficialsf.com is an amazing resource for anybody working with Salesforce automations. It covers flow, next best action, orchestrator, and a number of other automation things that you can do with Salesforce. It's a great resource. It is, as it says right here, it's a loose collaboration of bloggers, MVPs, and the occasional Salesforce employee. But it's not official Salesforce content or resources, which is why it's called unofficialsf.com, but it is community supported and open source, and there's some tremendous resources and information that you can get here. Looking further into the site, there are a lot of blog posts that are on here. There's a wiki, there's documentation, there's training materials, and a number of other really good resources that you can poke around and find on this website. Probably the most common reason people would go and visit unofficialsf.com is to look for some of the components that can be used in flows and in other areas in Salesforce. So if we look right on the first page for flow, we see there are installable flow screen components and installable actions that you can use in a flow. So if I click on screen components, we're going to go to a table of contents that lists a whole bunch of components that can be installed and used on flow screens. There's descriptive information, the type of component, as well as information on the most recent updates for some of these components. Let's just take a look at one of these. Each of these components has information or documentation to go along and support that. Here's a simple component here, a copy to clipboard button that somebody can use in a flow. And typically what you'll see in the documentation for these components is there'll be an explanation of how it's used or a demonstration of it in action, as well as instructions for installing it in your orgs, and what some of the attributes are that you can use to configure these components. The nice thing about these is these components are all written to be fairly generic and multi-purpose, so they can be configured a large number of different ways to really try and fit a lot of different use cases that you may have. So there's with each of these posts, there's a link to installation packages. You have a package install that can go into a production or developer environment, as well as one for sandbox. Occasionally you'll see these and they'll just have a single link, which is a login to the package ID. If you change the word login to test, you can use that same URL to install into a sandbox as well. In addition to those installation links, you will typically see a link to source code, and that'll take you to a GitHub resource where you can see the open source of the source code for just about any of these components. So this gives you the ability to see what somebody else did to create these components, maybe learn how some of these things are done, and also give you the opportunity, if you want to tweak one of these components to better fit your own particular use case. So you have the source, you have the install links, you have the documentation. There's one other thing I wanted to point out, and that's what you'll see on some of these components is some of them require what we call the flow base packs. And the flow base packs are a couple of different base packs of very common components that are used by a bunch of other components on Unofficial SF. We have the flow actions base pack, which it's a bunch of Apex code snippets that are used to support a lot of these components. It keeps a developer from having to reinvent the wheel. And the other nice thing about the actions base pack is it's designed as a managed package, which gives you a couple advantages. One of which is that all of the Apex code included in these packages will not count against your limits in your org because it's being installed as a managed package. The other advantage to that is you don't have to worry about some of the test classes or other things that might cause issues trying to install some of these in your own org because they get put in as a managed package. The flow screen components base pack is primarily Lightning components or Aura components that are used to, again, support some of the other items that you might find on this site. And a lot of these items that you see in the screen components base pack are there to support what we call custom property editors. A lot of these components are written with what's called a custom property editor, which gives you a little better interface when you're trying to configure it when you're adding a component to a flow. So a developer can create a property editor to better support their component when you try and adapt it to your flow. And these screen components that are in the base pack help those developers create these custom property editors. If we go back, I just wanted to show you one other table of contents we have here. These are all of the screen components. You can also select a table of contents for installable flow actions, and these are typically Apex actions that can be installed in a flow. And again, we have a table of contents with a bunch of different ones that are available. And there's a separate section, a table of contents for what we call the collection processor actions. These are Apex actions that are designed to work with collections in a flow. They really allow you to do more in a flow with collections, things that you might not necessarily be able to do with the standard components. And they also help you avoid putting a lot of loops in your flows to process various collections of records. I wanted to point out just a couple other things on this website. It's not just items that you can put into flow. If you look at the menu bar across the top, there are some other areas as well that are worth taking a look at. For example, pages. If you click on that, you'll see a list of some components that can be used on a Lightning record page or a Lightning app page, not just within a flow. An example here is, here's a component that if you want to do a highlight panel on a Lightning record page that displays more fields than what the standard highlight panel does that you're given in the app builder. Here's a component you can install and put in on your Lightning record page that I think supports up to 10 separate fields. So that's just an example of the type of thing that you can find here. Another place I recommend looking is the Utilities tab. The utilities are standalone apps or utilities that help support either an admin in Salesforce or other special requirements. And there's a lot of really interesting utilities and tools that you can find here. Just as one example, the first one here is an application I put together a few years ago to allow somebody to quickly switch between apps in an org, and not just switch between apps, but stay on the same record. So it keeps track of what record you're on, and you can switch back and forth to various apps that you might have in your system that your users have, and be able to look at that same record and how it might appear in a different app. So a lot of different resources here. It's worth exploring. You can spend a lot of time on this site, but it's great for expanding and adding to what you can do with Flow or with Salesforce, and also is a really, really good educational resource. So I will turn it over to a couple of the other presenters. Maybe they can talk about some of their favorite components or other things that they might use from this site.
Sure. Excuse me. Thanks, Eric. So I'm not a developer. I'm a Salesforce admin. I work at a e-discovery company in Chicago, and I came across Unofficial Salesforce when trying to solve a very specific issue. For me, I think the first component I ever downloaded was the filtered lookup, which actually came out before the Flow lookup component came out. Personally, I like it better. I actually continue to use it, even though Flow has its own lookup component natively. But I have found, as a non-developer, I found it a way to accelerate the types of things we can do in Flow. Because you can view the source code like Eric demoed, I can show it to my devs and architects to also review to make sure they have a degree of comfort, and I'm not just putting code in my org that hasn't been inspected by someone. I think the biggest game changer for us in terms of components that we installed, there's probably two. One is the rich text component. So we actually did something with knowledge articles where we were taking a plain text field from Salesforce. We were bringing it into Flow as rich text and letting our users configure it and write it into a rich text knowledge article. So what they used to be doing was they used to be copying it, pasting it, and then like formatting it and having to flip between screens. And this allowed them to do everything without leaving their case page. And my second favorite item, I would say, is the Slack integration. So that's something that was actually developed by a Salesforce employee, and it's called Slack Actions. So for us, what was great was it was easier to get to deploy a Slack integration with a custom object. It was easy. It allowed us to customize exactly what we wanted the posts to look like. And then through using it a few times, I learned actually how to thread posts using it, which I thought was a pretty cool tool. So for me, those have been the most interesting. I do think it's worth noting that there are, we'll talk more about it in a bit, but there are a lot of resources out there for questions, a lot of ways you can get support. So that's another great feature, in my opinion, of Unofficial, sometimes over the App Exchange, where there's opportunities for more dynamic conversation about things. I know Eric and I have talked more than once when there's been occasion where something requires an update, because as we know, Salesforce releases something and there's always the downstream impacts that might get overlooked. And so it's, to me, it's a huge game changer for my team, because it's not something that's like we get it and it's like we're on our own. We have a great community out there, and we see lots of innovation that really takes things that we do to the next level.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. I wrote in the chat that later on we'll have all three panelists to have a chance for a Q&A session. But feel free to write your questions in the chat, and we'll get you answers.
Hey, I can go next. So I'm Sasi.
Thank you, Sasi.
And I am one of the ones who came in as a admin, learned to code, and became a developer. Thanks to Rad Woman, that's why I learned to code, and also now coach and we like giving back to the community. So the way I used unofficial Salesforce was I was introduced first to one of my previous user groups that I used to lead from Mark Adcock. He came in and he was saying telling us about flows, and he said like, hey, and just in case if you need something additional and flows, go ahead and use Unofficial. This is where Salesforce, both Salesforce employees and Salesforce geeks go get in and then do all of this. So like we got interested, and I got looking at some of this stuff that is out there. And the two components that we used recently on one of the projects was the flow button and then the quick lookup. Just like Mary was mentioning earlier, there are some things that the flow out of the box flow lookup provides that we could have used and we did use. And then when we were demoing it at the end of a sprint, one of the things or bug or enhancement request came back as like, hey, this lookup is good, but this lookup, I cannot be filtered there. We need to see only certain section. We are able to see more. And they was like, okay, how can we do this? So we were looking at the options. Do we need to go the code wise? Do we need to customize? And one of the things that we are trying to do in the recent projects is stay away from customization unless it's absolutely necessary, and try to see what we can do in configuration, which is flows and other options that's out there. So one of the things that we came back, okay, let us check Unofficial, and there we found the quick lookup. So that was one of the things that we were able to quickly install. And in our current flow, it was just a switch of, okay, take the out of the box lookup, put this quick lookup, and then we could just all through configuration say like, hey, this is what we want to do, and put in the parameters, don't look up all, look up this, this certain custom object, and these should be the filters. And with that, we were able to do a very quick turnaround. So just like the other speakers mentioned, it is not, we don't have to look at the updates. We don't have to also not customize or write Apex code. It was easier done, and we had a quick turnaround. So the other option that we used was the button. And another thing that we did was we did both of these in the community or the Experience Cloud. So we had to kind of color it, and we had to customize it in such a way to go with the client's branding. And that was something that we could not do with the out of the box quick actions. So we used that, and we were able to customize it with their font, with their color, and we were able to position it. So yeah, those are the two components that we used, and it was very easy to kind of go in, get the package down, play around it with our sandboxes, and push it off, and able to close the stories in record time. So that's what we did.
Cool. Thank you, Sasi. With that, we can open for the audience to ask questions, and or if you want to share what's one unofficial SF package that you like, or that you have used.
All of us?
Yeah.
Sure. I've used quite a few. So in addition to the ones I've mentioned, I would say send better email is really popular with my team. It gives us a lot more flexibility than out of the box email alerts or the native flow email action. So that's a pretty highly used feature for us.
One that I use a lot, and this is one of the ones I developed, is the data table component, which allows you to present lists of items or records on the screen, supports sorting, filtering, inline editing, and a number of other features. It's I originally put it together as a replacement for dynamic record choice because I wanted to present more than one field at a time, but this one has really taken off. The last time I checked, it's been installed in over 15,000 Salesforce orgs, and has been fairly widely used. And I think it's a great component, and I keep finding new uses for it, and look forward to hearing from other people how they've been able to put it to work. And I think the other one that's very helpful is Quick Choice, which allows you to present a list of choices as radio buttons, check boxes, pick list drop downs, or even what we call visual cards. A lot of different ways of presenting either a pick list field or choices in a flow. And the real advantage to this one over the built-in components in Flow is that it supports record types. If you use a standard pick list component in your flow, you cannot filter by record type. If you use the quick choice component, you have the ability to only present those pick list values that meet a particular record type. So it really fits a really good need there. And as soon as we come out of pilot and release a new feature for Flow called reactive screens, I've updated the quick choice component to also support dynamic pick lists. So where you have pick lists that are controlled by other pick lists or by other fields like a checkbox field, you'll be able to use the quick choice component as a dynamic pick list as well in your flows. So data table and quick choice are a couple other really helpful components out there.
Oh wow, yeah, that sounds super interesting. And like but what was saying, I also use data table in one of my projects, and then it was a great help, and it's so customizable to tailor for a lot of different use cases. I was surprised back then. I used it a year ago and had a problem and reach out to you, Eric, and I was surprised to get a response, and I was like, oh wow. That's something really cool about the Unofficial SF community.
Yeah, I do monitor the Trailblazer community and other places, and people do have questions or issues. I try and reach out, I try and help, and it also, getting that type of feedback also helps me produce better documentation for it as well. So when other people run into those same issues, they have a resource or something they can look at to solve their issue.
Eric, I think the one thing we didn't talk about was how, if someone wanted to develop something to put on Unofficial, what that kind of process looks like.
Right on the home page, there's a link where you can reach out and either ask a question or offer to submit something, and some of the folks at Salesforce that are involved with the site will either get back to you, or I can get back to folks, and we can open that up. We can publish your blog posts, we can add your components to the site. We're fairly open with that. There's a Slack group for contributors where we stay in pretty much in good contact with each other and help through issues and that type of thing too. So if you have something, feel free to reach out through the site. We'll be glad to work with folks. Somebody just reached out the other day and said they had an interesting component to display a banner, a configurable banner, and they're going to be writing up a blog post, and we'll add it to the site. And you can also go to the GitHub site. When you click on any of the source code links, it's all a single GitHub repository, and you can propose changes and put pull requests and other things in there as well for folks to review. And a lot of times we'll pull those changes in and they become part of the component.
Yeah, that's something very interesting. Since, and I'm not sure if this is the case. I think it is, that all the components in Unofficial SF are open source, and the source code it's available in Git. So you can contribute doing bug fixes, improvements, or something like that. And when there's a pull request, the author of the component will be the one reviewing that, or the community as a whole?
It's both. I'll look at pull requests, I'll look at bug reports or other things, and either on a component I've written or a component I've updated, or ones that I hadn't been involved in. If it's something that I can contribute to or address, then I'll certainly take a look at it, as will other people in that community.
I can speak from firsthand knowledge. I know Eric and I worked on one, I think it was with Lookup, where there was a bug due to an update, and it wasn't originally something you wrote. I think the earliest version, but Eric was great helping me get that sorted so that I could actually move forward.
Yep.
And then I saw a question about the link to the Slack group. Was that the link to the contributors group?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll see if I can track that down.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mary. Yeah.
Hey all, this is Mike. There was a couple that I've used, and Eric, I think you're hitting on one of them. Was a banner. I used a rich text Lightning Web component, I believe it was, to display. We needed a way to display if we're not going to call someone, or more like a do not call banner is basically the high level view of it. We struggled with that, so we just slapped a banner right on top of the page. And then the other one was the show toast message.
Yes.
I love that one. So
yeah, that was a very, very simple component. It was originally put out there by Alex Edelstein from Salesforce. It was actually the product manager that started the site. And he just put it out there as a concept, and then I added a custom property editor and a number of other features and other things around that to try and make it more general purpose and easier to use for folks. So yeah, that's a nice component as well.
Yeah.
Hi everybody. I'm currently using the enhanced Lightning script, and I'm running some problem to filter the certain fields. So have anyone actually have the experience using enhanced Lightning script? The sortable, I think that's actually, but inside the Salesforce, there's a one component is called sortable data script. That's I'm trying to filter it.
Is it the data table component you're using, or the Lightning grid?
Lightning script, I think, because that's a different one. I think we have the data.
I think that might be an App Exchange one that's linked on the site. So I don't know if it's a freemium component possibly, but they might have a free version.
It's a free version. It's a free. I think we're the nonprofit. We most of components always free.
Yeah.
Have you reached out to there's usually a dev contact if you can pull it from App Exchange.
I just don't know how can they always run the problems when I have the lot of free this the package. I don't know how can I get the support, who I can contact. I just don't know the resource normally.
Probably the best place and the widest audience on that is the Trailblazer community group, Salesforce Automation.
Automation. Okay.
Yeah, it's called Salesforce Automation.
Okay.
There's a specific Trailblazer community group for Unofficial SF. Typically, if I see a question in there that might benefit a wider group of folks, I'll mention Salesforce Automation. Because the product team from Salesforce that's in charge of Flow monitors that group. They will often answer questions as well as the rest of the community as well. So I would say that'd be the first place to start.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay.
I also have some additional feedback. I quickly Googled it. It looks like it's a labs app. So that means it was made by Salesforce employees. Occasionally what will happen is an employee might leave or stop support. So there's a couple of venues that you can use to resolve this. The first is Salesforce Labs, if you're on Twitter, has its own Twitter account. So you can tweet and tag them, and a member of the team should be able to tell you if this is, because they aren't always able to keep up with their listings as quickly as they would like. So they can research the fact that there's an issue and look into it, hopefully reach out to you with a person that can help you support it. The other option would be if you can get Linda or Orlando your kind of your issue succinctly, Eric or I can reach out to, or at least I know I can, my contact in Salesforce Labs, and pass that along to her. And usually I get a pretty quick turnaround with this app is no longer supported, or we'll get right on it. But I'm happy to be that intermediary to at least get you closer to getting some kind of answer.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Well,
Sure.
that's really cool, Mary. Yeah, I googled that as well and found the Salesforce Lab package in App Exchange, and the latest release is from this year. So I want to guess it's still supported. It hasn't been that long, because then every so often you find Salesforce Labs components that haven't been updated since, I don't know, 2009, and yeah, those for sure. Probably there's nobody else to support it, and that, I guess that's another cool thing about Unofficial SF. Like if somebody starts something and cannot keep up with it, somebody else can inherit it and continue. And
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's one of the advantages of the Unofficial SF group over what you might see from Salesforce Labs on the App Exchange, is you do have a broader community available to help support those.
Yeah.
The magic of open source software, right? Like there's a greater community behind it, not just the person that started it, and somebody else can take it.
Yeah.
I have a quick questions. I think this is for Eric, and thank you for the data table. This question is related to that. When I was trying to do inline edit on a multi-select, it allows you to do it, but it pops up as a open text, and you would have to type in the value of whatever the multi-select is. And if you type it a value that's not one of the multi-select, it will just give you an error. Is there any workaround to have it as like a multi-select pick list, where they can just pick the value that's already predefined, instead of having them type or erase whatever value that they want to update?
Are you talking about inline editing a multi-select pick list field?
Yes.
Yeah, that could be a future enhancement. To right now is, this is all built around the standard data table based component that's part of the Lightning design system, and it has certain limitations. And one of which is it doesn't have native editing for certain types of fields. So far we've added the ability to do standard pick list fields. That's all being done with custom code in the component, because the base component for data table doesn't support that. So to add additional inline editing things, I think the next one I want to try and get out there is be able to edit a lookup field internally in the data table. Then I think after that we'll look at things like uh, what we might be able to do with a multi-select pick list field.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Hey guys, Sebastian here. I don't want to fanboy out or anything, but I love Unofficial SF. Use it. I mean, I can't even tell you how many components I've used on this site. In fact, I'm using a couple in a project right now. Love the data table. By far, probably my most used. I've watched the iterations of that and went through. I was using it when it was just the original V1 Aura.
Yeah. You had I had to hard code the objects it supported in that first version, the Aura component. Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. And when it got the update for the custom property editor, whole new level. Anyways, just wanted to say thank you and really love all the components.
Glad to hear that.
Anybody else want to share about an unofficial SF component that you've used in the past, or questions for our panelists?
I do want to point out or ask, that this is a group of developers. Personally, I don't consider myself a developer, but what I put together, I kind of chalk up to a learning experience or trial and error. But if you see things out there that you use, and as a developer, if you come up with ideas of ways to make it more general purpose or more usable for other people, please, by all means, try and make those improvements, propose those improvements, and keep helping us build this site and build things that can be used by not just the developers, but beginner admins as well, that can just take these things, configure them, and go. So if you have the ideas, the creativity, the ability, please help out. Love to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And something, and I was kind of involved in open source software back in college. So something that we used to overlook is that you can help out not just writing code and fixing bugs, but with documentation. Documentation it's so important. You can have
Yes.
the best software, but if you don't know how to use it, you're not gonna have the best use out of it. So yeah, the documentation is also a way to help out.
Yeah, absolutely. The documentation and sample use cases can be very, very helpful for somebody that's not quite sure exactly what something does, but if they can see a use case and how it might apply to something they're trying to do, it's a huge help.
Definitely. One, as a developer builder, when you create a feature, a solution, you're usually so in the weeds thinking about some specific use case that you lose sight of the bigger picture and cannot think of all other uses and that an actual user could have. And that's why when you deliver software, you end up seeing, oh, it's not being used as intended, and the users came up with another way to use your software.
Yes.
I'll ask a question for everybody. So what will be a good way or the procedure for somebody that wants to, to help out if it's code? I think that's kind of well known. If you know Git and start making changes and open a pull request, but what about on documentation? How can you contribute on that?
Oh, how can you add to documentation? For me personally, the first time I used the Slack app, I found the documentation lacking, and I'm going to say I totally dropped the ball on my end. But I put a question in, I put a comment on the post in the unofficial site, but I also went to Salesforce Automation and added a comment with like the things I learned while playing around with the particular flow action. And Alex reached out to me directly and asked, he's like, do you want to write a blog post? Do you want to talk about your use case and how you've used it? So for me, that was a really fast way to get an opportunity to contribute and share a use case. Like I said, I've dropped the ball, so please don't look for my post because it's not there. But I will get to it, I promise.
I just put a link in the chat. This is the link that's on the bottom of the homepage for unofficialsf.com, and it's a feedback and comment form, and that's probably a good place to start there. And also, again, the Salesforce Automation Trailblazer group as well. Feel free to post, updates and ideas and feedback there. So both really good ways to get that information out there.
Somebody else wants to take the opportunity to ask a question or mention something. I know some of you might want to ask something and you're shy about it.
I have a question about the quick lookup, actually. So I guess to give a little bit of background for everybody else, the quick lookup will let you select multiple records and have them be related. So like you could select an account, and then a child lookup will let you select opportunities for that account. My question is around defaulting values in those components. If you default a parent value in the parent lookup, it seems to ignore the child. And I was wondering if you had heard about that from anybody else, and if that was.
I have. That's been reported as a bug/request. I have it actually printed out in my pile of things that I want to look at someday to see if I'm able to contribute or help address that. That particular component, I'm the one who added the ability to do child-grandchild connections between the lookups, and it's done. This one is kind of unique. It's not a Lightning Web component, it's an Aura component, and it uses events to pass the information back and forth. So the event that happens is when somebody provides a value for say the parent lookup. So what I would have to do is to look at the code to see if nobody provides a value, is there a way we can fire an event based on the fact that there's a default value to then allow the next component down the chain to know that there's a value there. I just haven't had the time or taken the time to look at the code yet to see if that's a possibility. And one of the reasons I probably haven't done that yet is, as I mentioned, this is an Aura component.
Right.
And we're moving towards a new capability in Flow called reactive screens. And with reactive screens, it's in pilot right now, but that gives the ability for any component on a Flow screen to recognize what's happening on another component on the same screen. So I think the ultimate goal with this would be to have a Lightning Web component version of the lookup. that would be able to then recognize the output of another lookup component on the same screen and handle the child-parent relationships that way, rather than trying to continue to extend the older Aura component.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was actually just doing a little bit of experimenting with Quick Query, and seems to be it's gonna be pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's the Quick Query. There were a lot of changes to my data table component to support that. In fact, I got a new patch I just put out yesterday that fixes a couple things around what was happening in reactive screens with that. But yeah, that allows things like the data table on the fly to say, hey, some other component just said there's a new collection of data to display, versus what you had started with. And I think I'd mentioned earlier that there are some changes that I've made to the quick choice component to support dependent pick lists, where a quick choice can have a dependent value. And that dependent value can come from another component on the same screen. So there's some neat things coming.
Yeah, that's
Hopefully
very
in the next couple releases, we'll see that as general release.
I just shared it in the chat, a group for the Flow Reactive Screen pilot.
Yep.
For anybody that's interested, I never heard of that before. I'm certainly gonna follow up closely. And also an Unofficial SF entry by Alex Edelstein, talking about that feature being used in a component called Data Polar.
Yeah, Data Polar, and he's kind of moved that into a component that he's released, which is the it was the you had mentioned it a minute ago. It was the Quick Query.
Yeah.
Which I think is very similar to what he had started with the Data Polar. And there's a good sample flow there. If you install Quick Query into an org that has the reactive screens, that basically links it directly to the data table. So you can do filtering and sorting and selecting with the Quick Query component and immediately see your data table change on that same screen.
I don't have an org with reactive screens yet, so I just split it into 2 screens to do some testing with. But yeah, it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, you can create your own dev org. You know, those are free from Salesforce, and then once you have that org ID for your dev org, you can reach out through that unofficial SF link or the Trailhead link and have them turn it on for you in that org. They just won't do it in a production org, but
Right,
you can do it in a sandbox or dev org.
Do you know about the timeline for that? Is there GA?
It was bumped.
It probably would hit public beta first too, is my guess.
Yeah, and the reason it was, I forget the reason it was bumped, but there was one other thing they wanted to put in place for that, and the person actually running with that now is a gentleman by the name of Adam White. And Adam was one of the original contributors on Unofficial SF when he worked for, I think it was Capgemini as a consultant. And he's now gone to work for Salesforce and is now on the product management team for Flow. And he has the current responsibility for that reactive screens pilot. And he also has taken the responsibility. They are working on a standard version of the data table to become a standard component for Flow. It's probably be much more simplified and limited, but they will just like lookup. You can have a standard lookup component and an enhanced one. They will eventually end up with a standard data table component as well.
I kind of assumed that was probably going to be the case with how much traction yours is.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in contact with some of their UI folks and other folks on that, so it's getting there.
Oh,
The
wow.
reactive screen sounds very exciting. I'm an admin, but you know, having the ability to have component interact with each other within one screen is
Yes.
is very
Yep.
motivating for us to keep going as an admin.
Yeah, that was I think that the quick lookup, I think, was one of the first components that was designed to have that type of linkage on a screen, and having them build it into the Flow runtime engine itself is I think is a huge step forward.
This would also work on Lightning Page, correct?
Well, that's a little different. They do have connections and reactivity between components and Lightning Pages, but that's a whole different team at Salesforce. Unfortunately, that they are developing what goes on in Lightning Pages independently from developing what goes on in Flow, which is, I think, is unfortunate. I wish they would combine resources and share some of their interesting ideas, but so far they're running on separate paths.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. It would make sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So is it two separate product then? It's interesting. Okay.
I have a question actually for Mary or Eric around the email. So we wanted to use the branded ones, but the flow ones within the flow is kind of very simple and text. So what does the unofficial one give us? Can we do the branding and HTML in it?
I believe you can do all the branding with it. I personally don't do a lot with the ones I send out, but I know that since it's rich text, I imagine you can kind of put anything on it. Have you used Send Better with a highly formatted text template, Eric? Yeah, I haven't personally. The other option is you can always pull in email alerts. So if you already have it built in a classic email template, that's another option. I used Send Better for, I used the collection report option. So we had a use case where we're a software company. We have multiple instances of our product. And if a customer decides they're not going to renew, we need to spin down all those instances. So what we do is we are using collection report to look at all the active instances that we have logged in our Salesforce org. We pull them into, we have there's basically when the rep marks a renewal opportunity dead and it's very specific type, then our flow kicks in, it pulls them in all through collection report and generates a table. And then that's pulling that into our Send Better email. So instead of sending an email for every instance that's still active that needs to be spun down, we're sending a single email to our team that has kind of like an Excel table that we're able to use the HTML formatting with. And so those are cases where using the standard out of the box email alert doesn't work, but using something like Send Better email sort of gives us a lot more flexibility. I will say one thing we did learn the other day, we were running some smoke tests, and when we refresh all our environments, we mask all the emails, including down to email alert. Send Better email, you're putting the emails directly in the flow component, so we didn't catch that. So we were inadvertently hitting one of our teams with test ticket after ticket until they finally slacked us and said, like, hey, could you please stop? We're getting about 50 tickets and they're all garbage. So there are a few little things like that where when you're storing those kinds of things in your flow, you need to be mindful of your documentation for things like testing, because there may be a few things that, with an email alert, you can just go in and easily see it and be like, okay, yep, turning that off. But you may not catch some of the places unless you're doing something like scanning a VS Code project. You may not catch all the references.
Good. Thank you.
So do any of the three of you have helpful tips for someone who hasn't used Unofficial SF yet about how to get started in looking at it, finding things that might be of interest,
I started because I had a problem, and that's kind of always been my approach is, I'm in the community. So when Eric talked about the banner thing, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember someone posting and saying like, would this be cool? And I was like, it's cool. Like, I don't have a use case, but it's cool. But like, now it's planted the seed. But usually what happens is, like with my first one, we had users filling out a form. We wanted them to tie it back to a product, but only active products. And with the regular lookup, we had users picking inactive products. I'm like, wouldn't it be great if we could just filter this out? Like, is there a way we could do that? And then I went to Unofficial because I knew it existed and kind of looked through all the items, or asked in the community. But I think the best way is either a problem or just general curiosity. To Eric's point, you can put all this in a dev org. So I've definitely tried some stuff out. I tried out the Slack actions in my dev org first to kind of see how it worked. But I kind of believe firmly that like, if you have an idea or a problem, that's probably going to be the way you're going to use it first. Like even if the problem's minuscule, like, gee, I wish I could put a toast that had like a specific kind of message on it. There's Unofficial for that.
I'm going to post a link. I've given this presentation a few times, and I call it 10 ways to get creative with Lightning components. And it's more to get people to think about some of the things they may not have thought of before. And it's all based around 10 different components that are available on Unofficial SF. And it basically just shows how these components can be used, and what they're used for. And it goes through things as simple as a component that's on Unofficial SF that draws a line on the screen. I mean, you may not have thought of that before, but when you think about it, that might be something that you could put to use and would be helpful for you, all the way up to complex components like the data table or the quick lookup or other items like that. So I'm going to put a link to a YouTube presentation. I think this is one I did with London's Calling a year or so ago. But if you go through that, it'll just give you some ideas of some of the things that are out there on Unofficial SF, and may help you figure out what you may want to do in your own org.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think I would agree with Mary. I go to Unofficial when there is a problem. I'm like, hey, I know Salesforce out of the box can take me this far. Where can but I need to do the extra mile and search for it.
Yeah, I just put that link in the chat. So it's probably a 30-40 minute YouTube presentation, but you can skim through it, but it does show you the various components that are there and how they're used.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric.
So any other questions, comments out there? I think we're close to wrapping up, I think. I want to thank Mary and Eric and Sasi for sharing their experiences and knowledge about Unofficial SF today. This is awesome. I love that we have that resource out there in the community, and that it's kind of so well cared for and beloved of the community, as well as from the community. And the three of you are great what's the word, ambassadors for the product, for that site. And I know there are others out there as well. I know Sebastian talks about it a lot, though he's going to be shy about it. So with that, I'm going to turn off the recording as soon as I can remember where the button is for it.